Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Joseph Banks. I'm the Assistant Director for Career Services and the Dedicated Career Coach for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I just want to start off first just thanking everybody who's here today, as well as any future listeners that might be listening in on YouTube later on. Our Digital Takeout series is a great opportunity that we have here to hear from different USU alums, talk about their experiences, and discuss the different opportunities that await many of our CHaSS students. So before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that they can use the chat feature and the question and answer feature for asking any questions to our speaker today. And we have London monitoring those as well to ask after the first part of our discussion. So now I'm going to turn the time over to Andrea to introduce our guest today.
Thank you, Joe. I'm Andrea DeHaan, and I am pleased to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us and excited to tell you about today's guest. Today's guest, Jason Nelson, is currently the Vice President of Sales at Root and has helped scale the organization from 40 to over 350 employees in the last 18 months. Root specializes in e-commerce and helping elevate all things post-purchase for both online merchants and consumers. His teams contributed to adding over 5,000 customers in 2020 alone. Prior to Root, Jason filled various roles with Qualtrics in helping them grow and scale across both North America and APJ. During his 6-year tenure at Qualtrics, Jason helped lead and grow the employee experience business from startup mode to being the top-rated enterprise solution in the industry. During his tenure at Qualtrics, Jason also spent close to 4 years helping to build out the APJ business, living abroad in Australia, and aiding in international revenue, more than doubling year over year. Jason is very passionate about training, coaching, and development. His weeks are packed with interviews, ensuring he hires the right people to fill future growth needs that are essential for success. He is a frequent traveler to Logan, Utah, keeping season tickets for USU games, skiing the beef, and making sure his 3 sons bleed the right blue. And Jason, we are so thrilled to have you with us today. Excited to talk about interviewing skills with you today. And so I want to ask you just to tell us a little bit about your history and start by telling us how you came to your current position and how you keep up to date with the industry in which you work.
Love that. Thanks, Andrea. And super happy to be here. I was approached about the opportunity, and anytime I can give back and help existing students and alumni, it's always a very quick thumbs up for all things Aggie related. So I'll share my screen. Figured it'd probably be best to go through that story and experience through not death by PowerPoint, but 5 to 7 slides just to give you a high level of my story. And my main objective here is to help you understand around my what's and my whys. And if I was a student today, what I would hope that some people could be able to tell me that would help springboard me forward in terms of, what's life like after college, after school, after I graduate. So I'll share my screen and we'll jump into things here. So hopefully this shows up okay. Joe, Andrea, does this look all right on your side? Okay, love it. So as we're getting underway, I wanted to quickly go through a hot topic for students, and that's what do I do around internships? What do I do for work experience, networking? And what are some important questions and things I need to think about in terms of my motivations behind doing all of those things? So to get started, I always try to push on real world exposure to the business world. Super critical to then look at different industries to give you a different perspective. The biggest thing I looked at when I was going to school and looking back on even today is how do I remove assumptions and make sure that I'm actually gaining experience that allows me to know what is best aligned with my passions. Because there's a lot of things where even yesterday I asked my 8-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he's like, well, I hope I can do this, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And that's all fantastic. We should always dream. We should push the boundaries for our individual selves. But it's also important to gain different exposures into those industries and opportunities to where you can actually really, really closely align with you knowing, hey, I actually really enjoyed that. And so another key element here is looking for angles to leverage your degree. And I'll talk about this a little bit later today in terms of different ways that I continue to leverage my degree today, even though it's not the title of PR or marketing or journalism or anything along those lines. Like, I am immensely blessed with the experience I had at Utah State and the background that it gave me, and I lean on it heavily every day. And then this is a plug for all of you, regardless of what you're hoping to do post-grad. It's just networking. So build your brand early and often. And I can't stress enough how important it is to do that socially and then in person. Don't forget the in-person piece. It's still really important to ensure that you're building your brand and people have exposure to you as a person. And so examples of various work experience channels that I was able to leverage while I was going to Utah State. So this was all during my undergrad. I was able to work with USU admissions office, helping them with PR and marketing focuses, Icon Health and Fitness, sales and marketing internship over there. We even ventured out to oil and gas industry. Thought I'd love manual labor more than I did, but it was still a great experience. And then call center, dealing with inbound customer service. Most of the time, not very happy agents. And I know there's a few call centers in Logan, so maybe some of you would be interested in something like that. Door-to-door sales, how could I get uncomfortable, get out of my skin a little bit, go experience new states, different cultures, and try to figure out exactly, what I wanted and who I'd want to be if it was sales related. And then I even did different supply chain warehousing stuff in terms of imports and exports in Logan too. So all of that allowed me to round out and answer my questions that I'd like to talk about here of like, what did I learn through those experiences and what were my personal what and whys? And so my main ask out of this entire session is for each of you to come up at some stage, and you can always revisit this list though, is your what's and your whys. If you can effectively write down and figure out where those passions align with where you want to become and who you want to be, that'll make your decision-making process much easier. So I wanted to look at what matters in my career. I'm not going to read through all of these, but I wanted you to quickly see how I wrote and thought about my next steps and how I was figuring out what I wanted to do and become in life. And then it also fully goes down to like my whys and my motivations. So I know there's a lot on this screen. I'm not going to read all of them word for word, but I wanted to highlight a few. What matters in my career, there's a 4-letter word down there that is used a lot, but it's love. And it's love what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with. There's a lot of people that want that or say that, but to actually truly feel and believe that's happening in your day-to-day matters. And so pursue that as often and as frequently as you can. And then I also wanted the ability to learn and attempt new things very, very often. I wanted to fail and grow while I was failing, because it's okay to fail and you should run towards that. A lot of people are like, it's a new thing. I don't want to raise my hand. I don't want to push myself in this way because it's going to happen and I'm probably going to fail and it makes me uncomfortable. But you do those things and a lot of great thing happens for you. And then winning and sharing and doing that is similar to where it's right now, where how have I been able to find wins in life that I can then share with the likes of everyone on this call to hopefully help you out. And then what do I want to do? A lot of this was like, how do I wake up every day and feel super motivated and passionate about what I'm doing? It's easy to get caught in the mundane exercises or rinse repeat flows of just doing the same thing for the sake of doing the job. And so I wanted to find ways to work with brands that I'm passionate about. That was something I learned very, very early on, that I couldn't really replace jumping on a phone call with a brand I love and I'm involved with, or maybe I buy from, or I experience in different ways, and finding a way to benefit their customers and their organizations in a meaningful way. That went a long ways. And then I always wanted to figure out a way to become an effective leader and manager. At the end of the day, those are two different hats, but they're both really important to maximize and to overall perfect your craft around. And then other motivations for me was, how do I position myself in a way where I can have a continuous talent fit? I looked at software, technology, and the future in 2010, 2011 is, I didn't think that was going to go away anytime soon. If anything, it was going to continue to trend up. So I looked at the future marketplace and tried to gain experience there that I felt like I could leverage for the short term and the long term. And then I also wanted to basically earn latitude through performance, which is if you do really, really well, you have great tenure, you're trusted, you're reliable, you have different latitude to have flexibility in your career and your life to do things that you're passionate about with your family and the ones you care about most. So recap, find a way to do this exercise for you. It doesn't have to look exactly the same. It can look different for everybody, but it goes a long ways as you're trying to figure out what's next for you and to overcome maybe those hesitancies or concerns around, am I doing what I really want to do? So what I thought I'd do next is run through like my 3 main jobs that I've had since graduating from Utah State, quick blurb on what I did, and then key learnings from each. As you see the key learnings, I also want you to pay attention. They change and evolve as I grow, as I become a father, as I have kids, as I get older, right? The learnings start to slowly evolve and change. So some of these may matter to you now, some of them may not, but I wanted you at least to have that perspective of what that looks like over time. So many of you on the call are probably pretty familiar with Icon Health and Fitness, right in the backyard in Logan, Utah, and they're still doing incredible things. They've been around for a while now, but fitness is absolutely exploding. That's one thing that COVID has done to America is it's pushed people to look at their health and their well-being a little bit differently, and Icon's been right there for it from the get-go. So I did a lot there around travel, working with really every major sporting goods retailer, consisting of on-site trainings, business plans, marketing initiatives, collateral. It could be like signage, advertisement, point of purchase information, working on end caps in the stores, like a bunch of stuff that allowed me to overlay between sales and marketing and training and coaching, which I absolutely loved. And so it allowed me to dig in quite a bit and get that initial exposure to the corporate world, but doing it while still being in Cache Valley, which to me still is like a second home to me and always feels that way. So Icon was super fortuitous for me at that stage of my career. And then key learnings was, and this is absolutely applies to each of you, is like being young in your career does not define what you are capable of. There's a lot of sessions or meetings or scenarios where I was the youngest person in the room, and that's totally fine. And when it gets to that point, it's like trust in yourself and your abilities and what you know you're capable of, and just run forward. Don't look back. Raise your hand and volunteer to tackle a project, even if it's not your core job. That's also super important. Find mentors, so people that you look up to who have, maybe a similar career path that you would like to embody or emulate. And do your best to learn and apply those things each day as you gain more and more relationships with those people that are your mentors. And then get comfortable with the hard conversations. This is just like running towards them. A lot of times it could be, hey, I'm not comfortable with how something is happening in the workplace, or hey, I feel like I should be treated differently in this situation, or maybe I've worked in this job for a year and a half and I've never gotten approached or spoken to about a pay raise or a different opportunity or a different role. And so it's okay to get comfortable having hard conversations. You'll be benefited for those, and you'll set yourself apart from your peers in doing that. And then this is the last one, like building relationships with stakeholders outside of your department, like Andrea, Joe. How many different individuals at Utah State on the faculty team do you know outside of JCOM? Probably quite a bit. It matters. And so building those relationships and those stakeholders go a long way. And so that rounded up my 3.5 years at Icon, where I then had the opportunity to look at Qualtrics, which meant selling our home in Logan, moving down to Utah County, which was never a dream of mine, but it became a reality. And it's something that I've grown to really appreciate and like over time. But Qualtrics really gave me first like full exposure to being that full stack software as a service or SaaS company, where it focused entirely on new business. And the opportunity I had when I joined there was, hey, we're building this new software, we're building this new team. Why don't we take a group of 7 employees and basically build a startup within a startup? So we had to quickly figure out how to sell to Fortune 100, 500,000 type companies and figure out the right pains and needs to sell a solution and a product that didn't really exist yet. And we had to build it. And so it taught me a lot about how to be opportunistic, have that entrepreneurial mindset, and then work closely with people in our company to make sure that we win together. And then something that you saw previously was I had ambitions to deal with an international type of expansion, an international footprint. I've always had, a lot of passions for domestic and international. So I saw an opportunity to align with some of that with Qualtrics, where I had the ability to go work full-time Australian hours in the States, which meant I'd go into the office at 4 or 5 p.m. and leave at 2 to 3 a.m. So that was challenging as a young dad. Now we had our oldest boy, and we had one more on the way, which meant like life was pretty hectic for us, but it was something I really, really wanted. My wife was super supportive and caught onto the vision, and I couldn't have done it without her. And at the end of the day, we were able to make quarterly visits, build up enough revenue, enough customers to where we got the green light to move our family to Australia from 2016 to 2018, which opened up an entirely different world that I'd ever experienced before. Traveling there was one thing, but living there and helping set up an international office, expanding to new locations and scaling that employee and customer base was an absolutely new challenge, but fulfilling in every way. So it was what I wanted. It wasn't like this crazy shock or surprise, but I was grateful for it. And then I was able to help with building out locations in Australia. So Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, going to Auckland and New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, and helping build out that footprint to where we had a little over 100 plus employees when I left. And it was like the wildest, funnest, most enjoyable ride I could have ever imagined. And then it came back to come back to the States, where I rounded up my time at Qualtrics and was able to be a part of that $8 billion acquisition from SAP back in 2019, which 6 years, quite a roller coaster, tons of learnings, tons of experience. And I'll highlight a few of those here. It was taking risks and betting on yourself is worth it. There's a lot of times where we don't feel like we should take risks and we shouldn't listen to our gut, but every time you do that, good things happen. And then building virtual relationships 8,000 miles away is possible. And I think we've seen that more during COVID too. Like you can build a relationship virtually, and that's a skill set that's still important to ascertain and have moving forward. Your employees care about how much you care. Culture in Australia is different than culture, for example, in America. Their passions, their life, their hobbies, their styles are different. And so it was important to make sure I invested in the people. And that goes along with the next point of being aligned with the culture and actually giving your all where you're at, irrespective of where it is. Picking up your family and moving overseas is doable and it's meaningful. So if you have that ambition, run towards it. Don't second guess yourself and figure out a way to make it happen. And then this is probably one of the most critical ones here is balancing work and family. So invest in your personal ingredients for success and stick to them. Don't compromise what's most important in life for a call or a meeting that can ultimately usually wait till tomorrow. It's okay to push back and to do the things that are right for you and your family. And then winning as a team is always the best. And then do the unthinkable even when others are calling you crazy. It's okay to have the right levels of a healthy crazy. There's nothing wrong with that. We all have our quirks and our uniqueness to us, but it's okay to run towards that. So to wrap things up, I'll talk about my time at Route. So I've been here for a year and a half. What was super attractive to me was e-commerce was basically accelerated like 10 years forward during COVID. The leaders in the space for all things e-commerce were figuring out a way to sell, to position, to advertise, to market to us as consumers now that we couldn't go into stores. We couldn't really go into retail. We had to buy from our home. And so Route disrupts that industry and makes it very meaningful for anybody to go and find an experience that they can purchase online. They can always track their order universally, and we can do that through a myriad of ways. And one is through we have a free Route app on iOS and Android you can download. My wife doesn't like it because it tracks every single order that we purchase online and displays them all in one singular central place. But it helps you keep up to tabs on what you've ordered, where you've ordered it from, where it's happening, where it's tracking. And one thing that was critical during this juncture in time is I joined a couple months later, COVID happened, and we were going through this hyper growth. We needed to accelerate. And so we were still able to hire 260 employees last year, which is phenomenal to think about. But it made it to where we had to invest in our people in unique and meaningful ways to drive engagement and trust. And so our success has been super exciting, hasn't been done without a concentrated effort on our three pillars below as a team. These are really our values. It's authenticity, celebration, and team over ego. And that's allowed us to, be rewarded recently as one of the, best places to work in Utah. 99% of current employees say we'd absolutely refer, Route to a friend or family member. We have a 5.0 Glassdoor rating and 100% approval rate of our CEO. And that's all done based on that body and that framework of exactly what we're trying to achieve. And so I thought long and hard about my key learnings at Route. It's surrounding yourself with others who see your potential and push you to reach it. That's really important. Hiring has never been more critical, especially when you embrace your culture. Finding the best talent matters. Finding the best people matters more. That's a big one. That's a huge takeaway for us, and something we look at a lot in the hiring and the interview process that we'll talk about here a little bit later on. Learn to say no, push back, manage your workload. And then down here, this is a lot of just like direct report workflow management around trusting your direct reports and what they were hired to do. Show what great looks like, then just get out of the way and let people go perform and find a way to be great. And then set your own bar and challenge the status quo. And then if you're not progressing, you are digressing. So there's a lot there, but that's my kind of history summary, last 10 years in 10 minutes. So hopefully that was helpful, Andrea. And then at the end, it's like, there's my beautiful family. There's us at an Aggie game. So you need a little bit of who we are. And we are avid, visitors to Logan. We love going there on a frequently basis. And sometimes each of our boys, I think their first words after cookie was Aggies. So we're definitely invested in all things USU, but hopefully that helps answer that initial question and set the scene for the rest of the session, Andrea.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for that. Definitely learned a whole lot. I'm really glad that you did that practice of at least taking what lessons did you learn from each position you had. That's really good to look through that way. For us, just some of the questions. So we're going to talk a lot about like interviewing and such, and we've heard a lot like about Qualtrics, and you previously working for them and such. They're pretty well known for a rigorous interview process, and so just wanted to know, what can you share with us about the process, how you prepared for each step, and even how you made it through?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because I was nervous when I was going to interview at Qualtrics, right? It's something totally new, totally different. And I'd heard rumors, horror stories. What's it like? How do you have a good experience? And so let me walk through what I did, what I was able to do to prepare, and why I felt like that was able to translate into being successfully hired to join that company. So to go full circle, like Qualtrics, even route, like we have extremely low offer rates, like low single digits. Not a whole lot of people get to that final stage. So with Qualtrics, I was really wanting to get into tech, like I talked about earlier on. I was doing great at Icon, but like Qualtrics really ticked all my personal and professional boxes. So this is how I started. I reached out to 4 to 5 existing employees. I went out of my way to have a phone call and or meet with them. So I drove down to Provo on 3 different occasions, which was something that ended to be super beneficial for me. And I learned about expectations in the role, what success looks like, where the company was going, and what the interview process is like. So hearing from people on the ground is always an advantage and offers like, different perspective layers. And then from there, I really dug into what they do. So anybody in this degree or major knows how to do research. How to find articles like case studies, product demos, press releases, all of those fun things that really helped me understand the whys behind what they did. And then what really helped me out from there then, Joe, was like, okay, I applied, I'm getting ready to go into the interview process. I wanted them to know I cared. So I invested in their company way before they invested in me. And that goes a long ways when you're interviewing and showing that, hey, I've done X, Y, Z to show that I'm passionate about what you do. I know what you do. And this is how and why I feel like I can make an impact. So you have a competitive edge as a candidate. And so there's something that every candidate believes they do, and it's, I work hard, right? I do all those things and I'm reliable. I work really, really hard, but there's certain things in an interview process that you can have that emulates that work and that behavior. So I wanted them to know they could invest in me and I would make their teams better and, tick all the boxes they were looking for. So one thing about JCOM and this major and this degree is you do fine tune your communication skills quite early compared to your peers. So you know how to speak, you know how to prepare for a conversation, you do research on a company, and you also know how to write very well. Those are all massive strengths, especially at an interview stage. So I highlighted those things pretty early on, not by saying, hey, I can write really well, but like I wanted them to show and to see and understand those things. And then when the time came, back then it was, I had 4 straight interviews surpassing 4 hours by a total of 4 interviewers. It's pretty intense day, but I was ready for it because I did all of the homework and was prepared. And then that like nerves and jitters became more confidence and excitement. So that's a little bit of how I went about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And, folks will not necessarily know that, when Joe and London and I are putting together our series, we're thinking about people who have certain skills. And we were actually reminded of you after meeting you during one of our road trips, which we hope we'll be able to resume post-COVID. But we were reminded of you by a post you shared on LinkedIn. And it was specifically about job skills and interviewing. And in it, you listed the need to be authentic as one of the most important aspects of interviewing. And we'd love to hear from you about advice you have for especially new job seekers, as our students will be, who are looking to strike a balance between being their authentic selves as well as making a strong impression, especially if they're new to interviewing or if they're potentially stretching themselves for, a position.
Yeah.
How can you sort of find that balance and not come off as overselling, but also be true to the skills that you have?
Yeah, great, Andrea. I love that question. It's like an example. I've got 4 interviews later today, right? So I'm right into the thick of things here. I love doing it. It's part of my normal, but it also gives me a great opportunity to speak a little bit about what this looks like from our side of the fence. And so, being you really matters. We each have our own story, our own ambitions, passions, and talents, right? Like we're all unique and we're all different. Every single interview that I have, there's a period of time dedicated to asking about you personally and not professionally. So at that window, I think it's important to think of like, why do you think I care about you personally? Think about that, and then I can go into some specific examples. One is I really, really care about my culture. Culture is a broad term. It's used pretty loosely, but at Route we call it our tribe. Like we have a tribe where sometimes you hear the word family. We've tried to flip that on its head a little bit and be like, no, like family's family. This is more of a tribe, like an entire ecosystem of individuals all doing what they need to do and accomplish to help us flourish with where we're at. And so it's, do I see you fitting in with the team and making us better? There's also like, there's a certain people skills and confidence lever that I can look at too, of how you tell your story and how you talk about yourself. Like, are there accomplishments and things you've done to separate yourself from your peers or to go above and beyond the standard or the norms that you can talk about? It's always interesting where I hear interviews, I'm like, you did X, Y, and Z? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, why aren't you talking about it? Like, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Like, it's okay to be confident, to toot your horn a little bit, especially when you're doing it in a storytelling, your journey type of way. Other things I also really look for is, what are you doing outside of school or outside of work? What passions or hobbies are you pursuing? There's getting better professionally, and there's getting better as a person in terms of what else you're pursuing outside of life. So work life, outside of that balance is really critical to me. And so every employee I hire has a moment or moments that I associate with in that interview. Like I can walk around the office or I could hop on calls and like look at specific moments of that was where I understood more about their story or their passion. And so I think to elaborate a little bit more too, it's just like, how are you learning? There's even some people who are like, hey, I'm really invested in this. Let me teach you about it and why I'm so passionate about it. And it's just like, that's great. That's fantastic. Are you reading books? What have you done that makes you stand out? Because people will be like, yeah, I'm super hardworking. It's like, cool, show me and tell me and talk about it. And that allows me to get super personable, get to know you. But I think overarching, Andrew, to that question is when I'm interviewing a person, I'm also thinking of, can this person be 3 or 4 levels beyond this level that they're being interviewed at, where we can promote them, we can invest in them, we can help them build their career. And that allows us to then look at overall trajectory, upward mobility. And then I'm also looking at which manager on our team could best work with this potential candidate. Where can we slot them in to have the most impact at our company to hit the ground running versus just throwing somebody at a chair and saying good luck? Like, we definitely are way more intentional and methodical about that.
All right, thanks. Okay, so for my next question here then, Jason, like you've emphasized the need to have sort of a clear vision of your desired career path. When did you first recognize your professional career path, and how did you line up experiences that would help set you on that right track?
Yeah, I like that a lot, Joe. I think I highlighted this a little earlier to a degree, right? In terms of like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to gain diverse experience. It's okay to pursue passions that you have that maybe aren't directly aligned with your degree. But that doesn't mean you can't leverage and use it. I think the biggest underlying lesson in learning here is it's not okay though to be a top performer and stay in a job you don't enjoy. I think that's really, really important. Some people stay in those jobs because of risk, or they're comfortable, or they're not really sure what will happen next. And it's really, really important to, as you're networking, as you're gaining that diverse experience, as you're looking elsewhere, like you've got to enjoy what you do. And if you're good at what you do, success will find you as well. You just have to present those opportunities for yourself through other efforts and through other avenues. So it's not about who you know, but it is about who you know in some aspects too when you get to that point. So there's every week, and almost there's not a day that goes by where I don't have a text message or a LinkedIn message or a comment or a way that I'm connecting with somebody in some way, shape, or form that I cross paths with over the last 10 to 15 years. And so there's a lot there to consider, but I think that's overall how I would summarize that.
So, Jason, obviously we noticed in looking at your resume and hearing about your experiences that you've had the opportunity to work for several companies that sell technological services, right? Which technology and CHaSS, it's not always something that we think of immediately, at least as majors, that they go hand in hand. Although then we look and we find a number of amazing alums like you who are working in Utah's booming tech industry. But we'd love to know from you a bit more about how you found your own comfort zone as a humanities major, potentially in many cases surrounded by tech folks. And are there new skills you've had to learn along the way, or is it more about just understanding the vocabulary and knowing that you bring your own skills to the job? Like, how do you, walk that line?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Because if I was to look back at where I was as a junior or senior getting ready to graduate versus where I'm at now, I probably wouldn't have forecasted or guessed this is where I would have ended up. And so life's crazy. It takes you in a bunch of different turns and changes, but biggest thing is being prepared for those opportunities when they come. And so for me, I think a healthy parallel here to bring up, because some people hear about what I do and they go, oh, like that's not what you studied at all. And I'm like, no, hold on. This is how I'm still leveraging and using all that I studied. Then I go, like, I assist or support in writing job descriptions, job roles, posting on our careers page, our board. I work with marketing on all kinds of initiatives. I help define and publish internal processes that have to be written and set up and structured in an easy to consume, like concise, simple way that an employee can understand the day they start or if they've been there for 5+ years. Legal contracts, that's fun, right? But like, how do I work on those to ensure that our language is binding and beneficial and mutually aligned with us and our customers? Human resources. So that there's a lot there. And then the verbal communication and written skills, like absolutely every day come to fruition. So there's a lot there. And then another thing too is we're also trained to look at research and information that's presented to us differently. So when I see a resume, I spend a lot of time digging into that resume. When I see that resume, that's usually the single like best piece of work that I'm going to see from that individual before they start. Is there typos? Hope not. Sometimes there are. Is it outdated? Do they have links to, their LinkedIn, their Instagram, and all that fun stuff too? Because we're a socially diverse world now. And do I look at those links? 100%. We care about the people. We care about what they're doing. And so all of those have really helped me align with, still being involved in the tech space. Like new skills though, yeah, I had to learn a lot. And I'm still learning a ton. So for me, I talk about getting uncomfortable a lot, and it's okay to have that happen numerous times every day. But for me, there's a huge technology curve that I had to get comfortable with, knowing that I may start a job that I don't really know what their tech stack looks like. They could use different outbound technologies. They could use different customer relations managements or CRM, which everyone here has probably heard the name Salesforce. That's what that is. I use LinkedIn a ton. Every day I'm in LinkedIn, both for recruiting, for finding, for networking. And so another piece then too is, well, how do you learn the products well enough to hop on a call and be seen as a trusted advisor and a peer, and have, in a way, almost like a technology background when you didn't study technology and you don't like math? You're not a technical person. Like, that's who I am. And it's been tricky to figure out the right way to still become that subject matter expert, just through a lot of time, diligence, practice, and trying to make sure I'm working with all the right people to help me be the best asset that I can be. So there's a lot there that I said to that question, Andrea, but hopefully that was helpful in terms of just how I looked at my degree, how I'm leveraging it, finding comfort zones, and then approaching new skills.
Jason, thank you so much for everything you've shared so far. And I'll just introduce myself to everyone on the call. I'm London Scow, and I'm the events intern for CHaSS. And now I have some questions I'm going to ask you that have been coming in through the Q&A.
Okay.
So to start off, the first question is, in thinking of current students just getting into the working world, were there early experiences on your end that gave you the confidence to run toward challenges, or to be the person who puts their hand up and volunteers for experiences?
Yeah, I was talking about this last night. There was one specific opportunity when I was at Icon, where we had basically 5 weeks to come up with the plan to train 3,000 employees in 6 weeks across the United States. And it was just like, Jason, do you want to tackle this project? And I had no idea what I was doing, but I said, sure. And so that came with, like, when you get something that's a massive project, an opportunity that's thrown on your plate, it was like, okay, how do I align on product, shipping, logistics, flights? Like, I was in a different city for 6 straight weeks, from Oregon all the way down to Florida. And we had to go in person, train employees, answer questions, and go through that entire experience and exercise. And so that for me is like one thing early on, which was like huge endeavor. Didn't really know what I was doing, but trusted in my abilities and the people around me to help me get there. And I went for it. So I still remember in like the lunchroom after I said that, like 6 employees were like, what are you doing? Like, you have no idea what you're getting into. But I learned a ton and I was grateful for it. And a similar experience was like internally at Qualtrics, when they said, hey, who wants to help us build out Asia? I raised my hand, and I haven't looked back since, and that was a great opportunity too. But I think a lot of it's along some of those learnings. But if you don't do it early on, you really miss out on what you can become through it.
Thank you for those examples. The next question we have is, what are your suggestions to overcome imposter syndrome? So we've already gotten past the interview and now we're into the job situation. We've got the job. So like when you get into a new situation, if you feel underqualified, even if you are plenty qualified, and have a hard time adjusting, do you have any suggestions to deal with that?
Yeah, love that question. So we had 20 new starters on Monday at Route. So I've been immersed this week with a lot of new hires in various departments and teams. And something I challenge each of them to do is to find 3 stakeholders that matter most to them right now in their career journey at the company. Oftentimes people go, oh, well, it's my manager, or it's my manager's manager, or it's the person that's mentoring. Like, that's part of your team. That's fantastic. That's like your day-to-day. Who else can you find? And that stakeholder, and oftentimes is aligned with mentors. Like, who can you find in the company that you resonate with and you gravitate towards? And so, for example, I've got a new team of what we call business development reps or sales development reps, which is like getting ready to learn how to do sales, and they're all college grads. And so I push them to look at existing employees that we have who have been in that role before and have promoted from there and found success, and talk to them about their failures and their learnings, because there's only so much I can share and teach that resonates or goes so far, but I can't be with them every day. I want to be, but I can't be. And so I think a lot of that is really figuring out like who you can build a relationship with, and have some foundational wins that helped you. Basically, like, you're making deposits, but you also need to make sure you can make withdrawals too with those people. If you can do both of those things in a healthy, meaningful give take, situation, you're going to have allies internally that you'll be grateful for this job and future jobs as well, depending on where you end up.
I know in your explanation there, you mentioned a little bit about, failure and learning. And so we have one question. Have you ever failed brilliantly? And how do you view failure and learning from it?
Yeah, I failed brilliantly a lot. I think there's, like, hiring and interviewing is a really good use case. I'm not saying it's as much of a failure, but I make mistakes all the time. If you were to allow me to go, Jason, every person that you hire, let them sit in the office or work with you for a week and then make your decision of hire or not hire, I think I'd have like a 99% accuracy rate. But I still have use cases where I miss important or critical information, or I didn't ask questions that I should have asked. And then on the customer facing side of things too, like, maybe we're working with somebody who's extremely strategic and important for us as a business. And similarly, where we fail to uncover or find certain avenues or ways that can help us position ourselves in a way where we can continue to either working with them, winning the deal, where they may come back and say, actually, we're going to move in another direction. Like, looking in the mirror and evaluating what happened and what went wrong and what went well is a really critical exercise. I think what happens a lot in the corporate world, though, is people don't take the time to do that. And so it's very fast paced, and it's still important to take time to decompress, take a step back, think about what happened, and talk to other stakeholders and gain different opinions and learn what would they have done in that situation and what can be remedied and improved on. So in the future, you're ready to tackle that when it happens. But yeah, I think first part was around examples, failing, and then what was the last part of that, London? I think it was how I go about growing from it.
Yeah, learning and growing from those experiences.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I alluded to that a little bit just barely, but I think part of it is recognizing that you did fail is important. Don't just throw it under the rug and ignore it and hope that it'll just, you'll learn and become better for it. So acknowledging it's a big thing, speaking about it's another one. And then I always try to have some form of repository that I go to in terms of situational failures as a leader route. And then I also have failures I look at too as a dad or as a father. Like, there's important to be vulnerable with yourself and with others versus hiding it, suppressing it, and keeping it to yourself. And that's where you allow to, essentially, I look at it of, if you're on a runway, do you want to crawl? Do you want to walk? Do you want to run? Do you want to fly? The more that you embrace failing and share it and own it and figure out how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, the faster you get to fly.
Thank you for that. So earlier in our discussion, you were talking about the process of approaching the current employees at Qualtrics before you're interviewing.
Yeah.
So could you tell us more about how you reached out to the people and you asked for their help? Or in other words, what advice would you have for students looking to make connections with a company that they want to work for?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's super relevant for where hopefully most watching this session are at. The beauty thing about a tool like LinkedIn today is you can search any company, any job, any state, and find people who work there. And you can also figure out who do you have mutual connections with. So that's where I would first start, is who do you have mutual connections with at the company that you think you might be interested in or passionate about. Majority of the time, if you send them a personalized note that says, hey John Doe, I'm really interested in your organization. I see you work there. We have XYZ mutual friends. Before I start the interview process, would you be open for a 10 to 15 minute phone call for me to learn more about what you do and why you enjoy it? Super concise, straight to the point. And you'll be surprised at how many people will be like, yeah, for sure, let's hop on a call. So you're automatically then networking, building some information. And then at the end of that call, who are one or two or three other colleagues that you work with you think would also be good for me to speak to? So that's one way to do it, just at the top of the funnel of LinkedIn and going through that approach. Similarly, you could do the same thing with the recruiters. The reason I talk about going to the recruiters and then to direct employees is you're going to get two different perspectives. Recruiters are fantastic in every way, shape, or form. But then an employee who's on the ground is going to talk things a little bit more real world, real life application, what they're experiencing and what they're going through, what challenges, what hurdles do they have firsthand. And then the recruiting team is going to do a fantastic job relaying that information, but they're going to talk a lot more about the organization as a whole, where we're headed, the vision, the benefits, the opportunity to grow, and a bunch more details and specifics about the role. And so I think that perspective and having both of those go a long ways in terms of getting both information about a company, but hopefully excited about a company before you apply.
Okay, so another question that I've got for you here is you've talked about what interviews look like when they're going well. So what does it look like when they're going poorly, or what does a bad interview look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if I'm going through it and you say that, and I'm like, bad interviews, like thinking about ones that I've had where I finish them up, and I usually try to reach out to that candidate or have some form of follow-up to talk them through, where they missed the mark or where they can improve on next time. That's also super important because I want them to be successful, and I always appreciate the time they give to apply. And so when bad interviews tend to shift or change, comes down to a few different things. One is, if you don't know about the company you're applying for and you haven't done your research, not a great sign. Because before I jump on an interview, I really do look at the resume. I look at a cover letter if they have it. I looked at LinkedIn. Like, I do my homework before I jump on, and know I can basically talk to that person without pulling the resume up in front of me because I've done my homework. I'm ready to go. And so if they can't tell me about what we do and why they want to apply there and what their motivations are for the company, that's, first off, not a great start or a great sign. Not being on time, that's another really big one. Be on time and be dressed appropriately to interview. Another key one, and some of this is like just table stakes. You might be like, come on, but like, it happens all the time, so I'm bringing it up. Speaking and saying different terms or phrases that aren't professional, or that you'd want to hear on the working environment. So there's certain things that I hear on a weekly basis where I'm like, if you're saying that in this setting, I don't probably trust you to be on a phone with a customer in a similar setting and not to say something along those lines. I think another one there too is, I always, in addition to asking about people personally, I always make sure I leave time for them to ask me questions. If they say I don't have any questions, chances are they're probably not super invested in the job or have thought a ton about the day-to-day, the role, how it impacts them. And there can be a myriad of questions. It can be personal, it can be about career trajectory, it can be about the company in and of itself. But those are probably a few different levers there that are important. And then I think to round it out is, if I ask you a question and you talk for a certain period of time and you still don't answer the question, that's also not a great sign. So hopefully that helped, London, in terms of some examples, but it's almost just like housekeeping. Just try to be very well-rounded and prepared and yourself, and stuff usually ends up working out.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so the last question I have for you today is, some of us are very used to the formal in-person interview situation, but in today's world, sometimes we can't always have those interviews, or, there may be different levels. We may have phone interviews or over Zoom. Do you have any suggestions for interviews like that? Say we're sitting down over Zoom or we're on a phone call. How can I put my best foot forward and be most professional in that setting?
Yeah, I love that question, because there's a lot of good examples and similarly not so good examples that I experience pretty frequently. I think the first one is, find an environment that doesn't have distractions in it. That's first off really important. There's somewhere, and I know it's hard because everyone has their own situations that they're in, but try to find an hour of your day where you maybe don't have kids in the background running around, or you don't have music playing, or doors opening, doorbells ringing, your phone ringing. That's another thing too. Like, so try to eliminate all distractions to where like we're focused on each other and having a good, healthy conversation. A piece of that too is like silencing your phone, silencing notifications. Just a really quick way to get distracted, but also lose focus for a little bit, where who knows at what stage of that conversation you're in that really could be turning the interview in your favor. Another piece too is as you're on Zoom and you're sharing your video, some people don't love doing that. Like, we're just meeting for the first time. They're like, I don't love like hopping on, sharing my screen one-on-one. It's more like an intimate setting, but I've never met this person. And so it's really important there to, that's where personality really matters. And so don't try and be who you are not. That shows up glaringly super fast. Instead of like, we've had some, like a couple of days ago, someone showed up, suit and tie, great, looked fantastic, but it took them 40 minutes to really like just be them. And so we talked through that a little bit. And I know nerves, and you're in a setting, you've already, because usually when you interview with, by the time you interview with me, you've already gone through a few different stages and a few different phases of the interview. And so I think there's a question there too, London, around like your first interview screen with recruiters all the way through to like you're at the last interview before you get an offer. How do you make sure that all of those Zoom sessions are super effective? And I think there's just commonalities and ways you can build off of each as you go through that. I think overall, a lot of it stems with some of the earlier just information and stuff we've talked about. But if you're like engaged and you're not distracted and 100% present, that's sometimes the best way to kick off the interview right and to finish right.
All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for giving us your time and talking to us all about that. I especially loved all the importance of networking and how you can do that in preparing for interviews. And I think that's probably a step that not a lot of people take. You know, a lot of times they'll think, oh, I've got an interview, I'm just going to go there fresh and start to meet people. But doing that investigation, even after you've got an interview, I think is a wonderful tip, along with everything else that you've talked to us about. So thank you so much for coming with us and sharing all your thoughts and experiences.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for that, for the opportunity. Overall, this was great. And hopefully those that are online now or listening later will be able to take some of these and apply them in a way that'll help you out. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you'd like, reach out in the future. We're hiring at Route. We will be for a long time too. So if you or anybody you know is interested, reach out too. But I think whether it's me or different companies, always here to help, try to do what we can to help you get your foot in the door with the company you're after too. So who knows, I might be somebody we have mutual connections with at a company you care about. And I'd love to get a message from you.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. We appreciate, as Joe said, your willingness to not only share your expertise, as well as your willingness to have students reach out to you or connect with you. And I think you've just shared some great advice for students today. And, you know, we're thinking of students like London, who is also a PR major who is about to graduate. So we know this advice will be helpful for students like her as they go out into the working world, and potentially helpful for people that you're interviewing later today. If they're smart, maybe they saw our post tagging you on LinkedIn and they're going to come and watch this quickly before they meet with you, just to get the full insider view. So I do want to mention just a few things before we leave today. We will be rounding out our digital takeout series for spring on April 8th. So we're going a bit off schedule with our bi-weekly schedule, but it's because we'll be bringing in an educator while he's on spring break. So we'll be speaking with Mike Rigby, who is one of our alumni working in education, so that students who are thinking about a career teaching can get some direct advice from him on April 8th at 11. And I do want to mention that, of course, if you have questions about today's programs or any of our programs, you can reach out to our career coach, Joseph Banks, or to myself, Andrea DeHaan. And since we mentioned networking, I will also leave everyone today with the information that CHaSS will be holding its networking night for students on Monday evening. That is this coming Monday. It's open to all CHaSS majors or students with a direct affiliation to CHaSS. And those seats are filling up quickly, and we will be closing registration soon. So if you haven't signed up for our event Monday at 7, please consider doing that. And with that, everyone, I would love to wish you a wonderful afternoon. And Jason, we wish you continued success at Route. And we just thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.